My name's Nick Folkes. I think China needs a Tea Party movement. But with Tiananmen Square, do you think it's possible that the Chinese people come to the realisation that it needs to happen again? Because, you know, you said there's 60 million CCP members, but that's gone down drastically, and there's 1.3 billion Chinese. They're vastly outnumbered. I think they could have them. Yeah. Do you think that it's possible in the near future that the Chinese people challenge the totalitarian authority?
You know, when it comes to predicting the future, every one of you is as good as me. And my attitude, as I said before, as far as I'm concerned, you know, our job is not to predict the future, but to make the future. Because the future lies in our hands, I mean, not in each one of us individually, but all of us together. And in fact, my view is that people outside of China are going to have more of an impact on China than people in China, because within China, it's very easy for the party to just throw into jail anybody that disagrees with them. But outside of China, they cannot do that. And I think a lot of the movement we've seen in China on this issue in the last few years is the result of the efforts of the Transplantation Society, the World Medical Association, and the World Health Organization, and maybe a little bit David Kilgore and myself, but and the Epoch Times and New Tang Dynasty and so on. I think these kind of outside pressures impact a lot more in the way China behaves. I'd like to think Gao Zhisheng and Liu Xiaobo and these people have an impact as well, but I mean, these people are in jail and disappeared, and probably China figures, well, the problem that they pose is solved. Or even the Tiananmen Square people. I mean, they rolled in the tanks, killed 3,000 people. As far as they're concerned, end of problem. But for you and me and everybody else here, they cannot do that. And so I think that we have seen movement in China because of the way the outside world has reacted to the way they're behaving. And as long as we keep up that sort of pressure, we're going to see more movement.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I think we'll wrap up now. I want to thank both David and Dr. Yuan for their speeches tonight. I'll just say a few words regarding the situation. With Falun Gong and with the persecution of Falun Gong, it does lead to, I guess, further atrocities such as organ harvesting, just by the fact that they're being persecuted. An interesting thing tonight was Dr. Yuan, a first-hand account of the fact that back before the persecution of Falun Gong, there was killing of prisoners and using their organs. Now, the Chinese Communist Party denied that vehemently until the allegations of Falun Gong organs being used came out in 2006. So, you know, they come up with whatever they have to come up with at the time. The Communist Party has its own ways of dealing with things. Most of it comes down to denial or telling the same lie over and over again. If you hear something enough, you're going to believe it. The other thing they do is shut down, such as they shut down Tibet or Xinjiang or any of those places. When something happens, nobody can get in and get the real story. Nobody knows what happened. We know thousands of people were killed in Tibet a couple of years ago, and also in Urumqi in the last 12 months. We know those things happened through insider reports, but those don't get out to the main media most of the time. So these things are happening. They're still happening in China. Unfortunately, the Australian government and other Western governments, because of mainly economic pressures, will not speak out, and they latch on to anything that the Chinese say, anything such as we've got a new law which stops, which denies that anybody will get money for transplants, for example. In other words, there's no personal gains there, or we'll do this, or we'll do that, or now they all come from the prisoners, or so on. an example of the denial, the shame, the way they can actually stand there and look at you in the eye and say it didn't happen, happened a couple of years ago when some Tibetan refugees were going across the mountains to try to get to Nepal, and many hundreds of people do that each year. Many of them don't get there. Unfortunately for the Chinese regime, at the time there was a group of Western mountaineers on the opposite ridge, and they could see these refugees trying to escape. And then they saw and heard the Chinese border guards firing at these refugees, and a 17-year-old nun was killed. Now, they were on the opposite ridge. A documentary was made out of this, and many of you may have even seen this documentary. However, the interesting part, and the part which shows what the Communist Party does, was that the Foreign Office spokesperson came out quite blandly and said they fired in self-defence. They were on the opposite ridge, hundreds of metres away. These people were going that way as fast as they could, running from the shots that were being fired at them. None of them were armed, and they blatantly said that. And they expect you and I and the Western media to believe it, and Western governments. And we do. Our media fall off after a day's interest. Our governments say nothing. So it's up to people like us, and I guess everybody in this room wouldn't be here unless you had an interest in human rights. And it's up to free people, as people who live in a country like Australia, to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. And some people say, well, China, who cares? There's 1.3 billion of them. But the point is, if we don't speak up, then we lose our own freedoms as well. And we're giving away some of our own morality, I think, when our governments know these things are going on and they do nothing about it. So thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you to Dr. Yun and to David Matas. And, as far as the two Davids go, David Matas and David Kilgour, well, they're the forefront, I think, of trying to stop this awful trade. And so I'll close there. Just a couple of things. There's some free material here up the back if anybody wants to get it on the persecution of Falun Gong. Also, you've got a free Epoch Times 9 commentaries there. But if any of you would like a book, they're $5 each at the back there. They're good for keeping rather than the paper thing, which will deteriorate. And also Frances Milne is here from the Bridge for Asylum Seekers, and she deals with Falun Gong practitioners and gives them a lot of help. And she has a donation bucket if anybody feels like donating there today. I'd like everybody to, if you would like to stop and have a cup of coffee and tea with us and maybe have a chat. But thank you all for coming, and please, on this thing, you'll have a list of websites that are probably relevant to this, including China Uncensored. Please keep an eye on it, bookmark it, pass it on to your fellows, so that we can get some of these things out into the open. And if we have further forums, of course, we will let you know. If you could sign the book, if anybody who hasn't signed the book, and leave us a contact, and we'll let you know of any further forums or if anything of further interest. So thank you all for coming today, and thank you again to David Matas and Dr. Yun. Thank you all.